Can a nation go bankrupt? You might think the answer is obvious. Countries print money. They borrow. They always find a way, right? But what if I told you that one of the cradles of Western civilization, Greece, once became so indebted, so dependent on foreign lenders, that it essentially sold its future for short-term survival? A modern European country, in the 21st century, on the brink of collapse. Riots in the streets, banks closed, pensions slashed, hospitals running out of medicine, and behind it all, a series of decisions that no one questioned until it was too late. How did this happen? And more importantly, could it happen again? Today, we unpack the Greek debt crisis, a slow-motion disaster decades in the making, and a mirror held up to the modern financial world. To understand the Greek crisis, we need to rewind the clock not just to the early 2000s, but all the way back to the end of World War II. Post-war Greece was politically unstable, oscillating between democracy, military coups, and civil war. But by the 1980s, things began to settle and spending began to rise. The Greek government expanded the public sector, creating thousands of state jobs, generous pension systems, and wide-reaching social programs. Politicians on both sides knew that public spending won votes. And how did they pay for it? Simple: borrowing. For decades, Greece borrowed from international markets to fund a lifestyle it couldn't afford. But as long as growth continued, no one asked too many questions. Then came a twist that changed everything: the euro. In 2001, Greece joined the Eurozone, adopting the euro as its currency. On paper, this was a monumental achievement. It meant access to the European Central Bank, lower interest rates, and instant credibility with investors. But behind the scenes, things didn't add up. To qualify for the euro, countries had to meet strict fiscal standards, budget deficits below 3% of GDP, debt levels under 60% of GDP. Greece didn't meet them, but with help from global investment banks like Goldman Sachs, Greece used complex financial instruments, currency swaps, and creative accounting to hide the true size of its debt. It worked. Greece was admitted into the euro, and borrowing became even easier. European banks flooded the country with cheap credit, believing Greek debt was now backed implicitly by the stability of Europe. And Greece, it kept spending. From 2001 to 2008, Greece ran large budget deficits year after year. Public wages soared, pensions were awarded early. Entire sectors depended on state subsidies. Meanwhile, tax evasion was rampant, and the government's actual revenue was far lower than it appeared. But everything changed in 2008. When the global financial crisis hit in 2008, investors panicked. Countries everywhere were scrutinized for financial weakness. And suddenly, Greece's books didn't look so good. In 2009, a new Greek government came into power and revealed something shocking. The previous administration had been underreporting the country's deficit. Instead of the 6% deficit they had claimed, it was over 12.5% of GDP, later revised to 15.4%. The world reacted swiftly. Credit rating agencies downgraded Greek debt. Bond yields spiked, and the cost of borrowing surged. By early 2010, Greece was on the edge of default. The country couldn't pay its bills. It couldn't roll over its debt. And since it no longer controlled its own currency, it couldn't print money to escape the crisis. Greece was trapped. In May 2010, Greece received a €110 billion bailout from the IMF, European Central Bank, and European Commission, the so-called Troika. But the money came with strings attached: massive austerity measures, cuts to pensions and public wages, tax hikes, privatization of public assets. The logic: cut spending, regain credibility, and stabilize debt. But that's not what happened. Instead, unemployment soared to over 27%, youth unemployment past 60%. Suicide rates increased, businesses closed, The economy shrank by over 25%, worse than the US during the Great Depression. And the debt? It didn't go down, it went up, because GDP collapsed. Greece's debt to GDP ratio rose, making the problem worse. It became a debt trap. Cuts caused contraction, which made the debt even harder to pay. In 2012, a second bailout followed, another 130 billion euros, along with a partial default where private bondholders took losses. But even that wasn't enough. By 2015, Greece had gone through 5 years of austerity, and the social fabric was unraveling. That year, the radical left-wing party Syriza was elected, promising to end austerity. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras called for a referendum, asking the Greek people whether to accept the Troika's terms. The result, 61% voted no. But days later, facing total economic collapse, Tsipras reversed course and accepted a third bailout, 86 billion euros, under even harsher conditions. Banks were closed, capital controls were imposed. People were limited to withdrawing 60 euros per day from ATMs. Pensions were slashed again. By 2018, Greece officially exited its bailout programs, but the scars remained. The economy was a fraction of its former size. Debt remained above 180% of GDP, and the country had handed over budgetary control to foreign institutions. In short, Greece sold its economic sovereignty to survive. Now here's the part no one talks about. This wasn't just a Greek tragedy. It was a warning, because many of the conditions that led to Greece's collapse are not unique. Let's look at the US today. National debt over $34 trillion, $1 trillion deficit in just 6 months. Interest payments soon to exceed military spending, and yet we keep borrowing. Other countries, same story. Italy, debt to GDP over 140%, Japan, over 260%, France, UK, China, all heavily indebted, all betting on continued growth. And all of them share something with Greece, a belief that the system will hold, until it doesn't. Remember, Greece's crisis didn't begin with riots in the street. It began quietly, silently, invisibly, through decisions made over decades, justified as temporary, but repeated until they became permanent. Debt doesn't kill overnight. It kills slowly, then all at once. Debt builds up invisibly. 4 years, markets don't react. Then suddenly, confidence disappears, and everything unravels. Crisis is always slower than you think, until it's faster than you can react. The next Greece might not be a small country on the periphery of Europe. It might be much bigger. It might be us, because history doesn't repeat, but as Mark Twain said, it often rhymes. And the echoes of debt, dysfunction, and denial are getting louder. If this video gave you a new perspective, don't let it end here. Like, comment, and share this story so others can learn from the past before it becomes their future. And subscribe to Echoes of Wealth for more deep dives into the financial stories that shaped our world and still shape our lives today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and listen closely to the Echoes of Wealth.